Oh my gosh, guys, you just hit play on an incredible, truly so jam-packed conversation that no matter where you are in your business journey, you need to hear this. So we're talking about the stuff that maybe you think about but don't talk about, the stuff you've experienced and questioned internally about our quote unquote online business world. So I'm chatting with Maggie Patterson, who I've learned from for years now. She's absolutely incredible, as you're about to get to hear. She's the editorial director at Scoop Studios, and she's the creator of BS Free Business. And she's an advocate for humane business practices rooted in respect, empathy, and trust. And she is someone who's really trying to change the way we have been taught to run our businesses, the way we've taught to market, for the better. So today you're going to hear us dive into things like what online business has in common with cults, MLMs, and self-help culture, scammy online business practices to watch out for, both from a consumer standpoint and also talking about how you yourself market your business. We cover things like luxury lifestyle marketing, income claims marketing, and so much more. We talk about the problem with these really super expensive luxury coaching packages and masterminds. The evolution of online business. We spent some time talking about the craziness that was 2020 for business owners and how that has impacted online business today, 4 years later. Why it's good to stay solo as a service provider and, not always feel like you got to launch passive income, you got to make the course, the template, whatever it is in order to be successful. Maggie has some really just incredible thoughts on that I super agree with. So much more. That's a little scoop of it. So anyway, you're going to love this conversation. I absolutely did. And like I said, it's jam-packed. We cover so much in this 1 hour interview. So let's get to it. Hey guys, I'm Elizabeth McCravey, an online educator for entrepreneurs, website designer, wife, boy mom, and your host for the Breakthrough Brand podcast, the show that's all about pulling back the curtain on how to actually build a successful business. I don't skim the surface around here. If you want to dive deep into the nitty-gritty details of what it takes to run a sustainable business that fits your unique lifestyle while standing out in a crowd, then you are in the right place. I created a multiple six-figure a year business in my early 20s, and now in my 30s, I'm still running that successful multiple six-figure a year business on just part-time hours now as a working mom. I'm here to share everything I've learned and everything I'm still learning because I believe that the keys to building a thriving business should never be a secret. Here you'll find episodes that are actionable, direct, and fun, like friends chatting business over coffee, and a fresh, honest take on the reality of being an entrepreneur. If you're ready to master online marketing, website design, personal branding, mindset, time management as a busy parent, scalable and passive income, and business strategy, then this is the podcast for you. It's time to build your breakthrough brand. Let's do this. All right, guys, I have the honor of chatting with Maggie Patterson today from BS Free Business. And I've learned so much. I told Maggie this before we started recording, but I've learned so much from you in the past 5 years or so since discovering you and both your content on Instagram, your blog, your multiple podcasts that you have, and you're just so knowledgeable and helpful. And so if you haven't already heard of Maggie, you're about to love her and be oh my gosh, she's saying things I thought, but maybe couldn't put words to. So anyway, Maggie, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and then also how you've had your business a while. So how you got into the online business space, so to speak.
That was quite an intro. Hopefully I can live up to it. So I am Maggie Patterson. I am a proud Canadian. I live in Ottawa, Canada. I am the mother. Elizabeth and I were talking. I am the mother of a fully launched adult. So that is very interesting, who's out in the world. And I actually, that same child, he's 20 now. When I was going on my maternity leave, I was I don't think I'm going back to my job. And I have basically run a business in some way, shape, or form ever since. And my background was in communications and PR. So I just kind of started doing that on a freelance basis. And I did that for, I think 8 or 9 years. And then I accidentally fell into the online business world. I was oh, there's people like me I can talk to. This is exciting. And I feel that's where a lot of us enter, right? We start a business and we feel isolated. We feel disconnected from our friends who have a 9-to-5 or a partner. And we're trying to figure that out. So for me, it was very, very enticing. And over time, my business changed and evolved. And today I run a content marketing agency working for tech companies. And then also I do consulting through BS Free Business. And with BS Free Business, I work mainly with micro agencies. So, agencies kind of sub 5 employees, as well as people who, what I would say, staying solo. They really want to stay solo as business owners. And all of these people want to continue offering services. They don't want to do courses. They don't want to do it. They really want to just focus on the thing they do best. And what I've discovered through all that is with my marketing background, with my communications background, with my business background, I have this knack for saying the thing, like just what you said, Elizabeth, the thing other people are thinking. Like I'm able to break it down. Like, how does it work? Why are we doing this? And people are always like, oh, that's why I fell for it. So that is definitely part of the brand, hence the name BS Free Business.
I love the staying solo stuff, which we're definitely going to talk about that. And it's so cool. You have the multiple kind of sides of your work and so many years of entrepreneurship experience. So one thing let's just dive right into it. So I've heard you say that online business, which is such an interesting term to begin with. We could even talk about that. But like you've said, online business is the love child of self-help, MLMs, and cults, which is just like, what a statement. Can you kind of unpack that and explain like what you mean by that?
So what we see here in 2024, I think I said that 3 or 4 years ago, and I continue to say it, is a lot of the practices that have become normal, and I use air quotes around normal because they are kind of what I call business as usual tactics in online business. A lot of manipulation, a lot of coercion, a lot of mindset, and all those, mindset in particular is valid, but not the way I see it in online business. And so if you start to trace back the roots, if you think of it as a family tree, a lot of the tactics, a lot of the things that I consider scammy, they have origins in self-help. Like look at some of the big kind of self-help names that do these, very large, I try not to name names, these very large groups. Same tactics we'll see in an online business event. The coercive control, the kind of trying to manipulate people around their behavior, around the information they get, around their thoughts, around their emotions, that absolutely shows up in online business. And that is peak cult behavior. So, and then the MLM thing, there's a lot of the messaging, like, I made this, it's so easy, I can work from home. We see these threads, and a lot of the people that are at the very kind of, entry point of online business, they come from self-help. They come from MLMs. They don't necessarily come from cults, but they're definitely using some culty practices.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of that, like you're saying, it's been like, it's so ingrained into like how we're even taught to do business.
Yes.
If you like came into business through this like online business world as your entryway into it versus like having done another type of work before. Yes. Let's talk about some of those scammy practices though. There's so many that, again, you've been like eye-opening to me about a lot of these where I'm like, wait, like, yeah, that doesn't make sense. Like, why was I doing that? Why is this person doing that? Why am I like thinking this is a reason to buy from someone, etc. But one in particular that I think is hard because I do think it's super, super common. I've been guilty of it myself, but like the concept of I can do it, you can too, as a common way to market whatever it is you are selling, especially when it comes to online education. Yeah. Can you kind of unpack what's wrong with that and like why we end up doing that and all that?
So I love this tactic because it feels like such a natural thing for us to do. You need to look at it from the perspective of when people are doing this, a lot of times it's with good intentions. We're excited, we're inspired. We see that the blog strategy we used or the social media strategy or, how we were able to double our freelance business or whatever it is. We look at that and we are like, yeah, I can teach other people to do this. But what we fail to understand is, number one, the circumstances, the conditions for our success are very different for other people. That could be in terms of identities we hold. That could be in terms of access to financial resources. That could be different privileges may hold. So when you start to think about that, this is where it starts to break down. And then the other part of it is, if you just kind of fell into, let's say, figuring out how to use Pinterest, that doesn't make you an expert on the topic. And what we really have is this entire culture where it's like, teach what you know, which, yes, please teach what you know, but please make sure what you know actually has more than like one success story that is you. And hey, we've all got to start somewhere. But what we see is people really overselling what they can do and promising results that they can't realistically deliver. And then it sets our clients, the people that are paying us, that are trusting us, up to not be successful. And that's really what we see so much of in online business. And I don't necessarily think it's always malicious. I think it's well-intentioned, but at the end of the day, can you realistically deliver the same result for that person? Probably not in the exact same way. And so that overpromise falls apart and it damages our reputation really, really quickly.
Yeah, and the first to market concept, I feel like is really big with that a lot of like, I know you've used the term celebrity entrepreneurs, like we're the first to market. So it's like when you are the first person to ever make a funnel or to ever run Facebook ads or like to ever teach Pinterest or whatever it is, it's going to be a lot different results. Like, how do we not like fall victim to that? I know it's like, that's like the big question. How do we not do it? And how do we not fall victim to it?
So what I see happening a lot of is we all show up here with a set of skills. Maybe we're a great copywriter, we're a great designer, a great photographer, whatever that is. And then we are essentially seduced by this entire way business is done. And then we have these celebrity entrepreneurs and they come in many shapes and forms. Trust me on that one. But they, telling us, well, you can make more money if you're this, if you're a coach, if you sell a course, if you do this. And the reality is we get so far away from what our skills and actual experience are that we are less likely to be successful. And we're creating a lot of stress and making a lot of promises. It's really like, if you think about the promises and not being able to deliver to the people you say you're going to, we are probably going to, anyone with a moral conscience, be in a situation where we feel terrible about ourselves. So why would we do that to ourselves? If you really want to be, let's say a copywriter right now, and you really want to become a coach, invest time and energy in getting the skills you need. Do the practice hours, do the, applicable certifications. Please make sure they're legitimate, but really investing in building up your craft the same way you would have outside in real world. So many times we forget because it's online, we're still dealing with real people. And I think it can become very depersonalized and really about what we want to achieve and not have a lot of respect for the people that are hiring us.
Yeah. And we have a lot of the like, coaches, coaching coaches, which it kind of goes to the MLM concept as well. Of like, if you think about that, it's a pyramid with one person or a few people at the top teaching everyone. Yeah, that's huge. Another one I wanted to ask you about is the luxury lifestyle type of marketing, kind of affluence marketing. I feel like at one point when I started my business, I started mine in 2016. That was like the guy in front of the private jet. It was like kind of the vibe then. Now you don't actually see that as much anymore. The guys are not doing that. I feel like I don't see it as much at least, but you do see like in terms of women, like a woman with a Range Rover or like you're working in Bali. I saw an ad the other day that was someone in a hot tub with their dog. And it was just like weird stuff like that. I'm like, why? And I feel like I'm probably going to, with my phone over here listening to me, perhaps going to get some more ads about stuff like this. I feel like my algorithm goes through like seasons where I'm seeing like so much of that. Anyway, though, what is up with that? Why do we fall victim to it? Why are people doing it?
So if for anyone here has ever heard of Robert Cialdini, the principles of persuasion. One of the principles of persuasion is something called trappings. So we are signaling to people that you can trust it. And when we, think about persuasion, it is neutral. It can be used in a positive way. So let's say a doctor wearing a coat, or it can be used in a negative way. So when we're thinking about trappings, it's like this cognitive shortcut where our brain goes, oh, well, they must be doing well. We assume if someone's got, let's say, the red bottom shoes, or they're flying private, or they're on a yacht, or even, wearing certain brands, traveling certain places, it can be any number of things. it's a shortcut that we can trust them, and we're assuming they are successful. What we're failing to recognize is a lot of cases, these people are renting these things, faking these things. I read this wild story, and I always use this as an example, but it just really drives home, is people were faking flights by using a toilet seat. Like they were looking out the airplane window. Like there's so many situations of this. Or there's people like building sets. Influencers in the US doing this somewhere. They were building these like fake private jet sets that people could do photo shoots in. So we have to take what we are seeing with a very strong and healthy dose of skepticism. And then the other part of it is that, especially right now in 2024, business has been hard for a lot of people. A lot of people have, even on a personal level, not recovered from the financial hits of the last few years. So when we are financially struggling, or when we are in a place where we're not able to meet our needs in the way we would like to, we are even more vulnerable. So we've got, on one hand, we've got this kind of persuasive tactic. On the other, we want what they have. So we very easily become swayed by that. And if you're looking at me, like, I'm going to use the word plain, and they like very like, I don't live a fancy life. And don't get me wrong, I'm doing fine and I'm very comfortable, but that's not part of my marketing. Or someone who's like showing up and showing out all the time. A lot of times this is going to be more appealing to people because they think that they can have that too. It's extremely aspirational. And our brains, we want to be successful. We want to be comfortable. We want the things they have. And then it also ties in the very end is like, there's a very strong, especially in the US and Canada, in Western culture in general, a lot of prosperity gospel where we feel entitled to wealth and riches. We believe that if we work hard enough, we can get it. And there's a lot of us that have been convinced through different things that it's just like that. We're like one step away, like that little shortcut. If we can just find the secret, we'll get there. So when you bring all of that together, aspirational stuff like the luxury lifestyle becomes incredibly appealing for people.
Yeah, I totally see that. With the lifestyle stuff, and like you're saying, of like the whole concept of like selling what you've done in your business in order to sell someone something with the, it's luxury lifestyle. And it even goes back to the first thing of like, I can do it, you can too. Yes. So when I started my business in 2016, I feel like I remember it being, you can have a 5-figure month, you can have 10K months. It was like, that was the numbers. And then it became 7 figures. Yep. And now it's 8 figures. And, 8 figures is a $10 million business or more. We're assuming people mean yearly. Sometimes people, use that term very poorly to mean like the cumulative years of their entire business. But
don't start me on that one, Elizabeth.
I would love to start you on that one. I've talked about that on my podcast before too. Like, when people say I have a 6-figure business, cool. Is it 6 figures that year? Is it revenue? Is it profit? Is it the 10 years you've been in business that you made $100,000? So you rant on it. Tell us all the things.
Oh my gosh. So the income claims thing, and I'm glad you brought it up, that there's been this continuous upping of the stakes. Mm-hmm. And what really irks me about this is that the numbers, when you look at studies done on entrepreneurs, especially women or people from marginalized groups, very few people are getting to $100,000 a year. There was an Amex study, I believe a 2019 study, and I think it was like basically 89% of, women entrepreneurs don't ever get to this. And this data is borne out time and time and time again. So even the 6 figures or the 10K months is not what people are reaching. Do I believe people can reach it? Absolutely. But there are certain, again, conditions for success for that to happen. And we are never being told the whole story about anyone who's using an income claim. Like, let's say someone says, I have a 7-figure business. Please tell me all the conditions for this. How much did you spend? Do you draw a salary? Because us normal people out here, we need to be bringing home money. I can't just invest it all back into my business. I got to pay my kids' rent, there's certain things that need to happen for each of us. So, there's so many things that are involved. Were they first to market? Like, there's a lot of people have been in this market for like 15 years, and they are bringing out like, my cumulative income is X number zillion dollars. It's like, yeah, you were like one of three in the beginning. That result is going to be extremely difficult for someone to replicate. So when we look at income claims, like, there is this really appealing part of it from a consumer point of view, right? Because we don't talk about money in our culture that way. So when someone is bringing that up and saying, oh, I made 10K and 10K last month or whatever, we immediately lean in and we're like, interested, tell me more. When a lot of what we're seeing, it's fabricated, it's embellished, it's not telling the whole story. And it's there to manipulate us into thinking, again, much like the luxury lifestyle, we can have the exact same thing. And it's a pipe dream for a lot of people. Do I think you can make amazing money in the online business world and be super ethical? Yes. But from my point of view, you can do that without having to promise people how much money they are making. And it's really interesting for me. Years ago, probably 2016, I had a coach who was like, you need to do this. I did it. I hated it. It felt awful. I did not like the vibe it created with my clients. So I stopped doing it. And I really started digging into it and learning why it was so effective. But the interesting part is I, to this day, will have people that choose not to work with me because I will not say, oh, you could make this. Until I am deep into someone's business doing consulting work, I don't know. What is your pricing structure? What's your client base? What's your offer? Like, there's so many things. So when someone is making you that promise, it is a very oversimplified, generalized promise that very likely does not apply to you.
Interrupting this episode with a suggestion for the small business owners listening. Ever wonder what you should do for healthcare when you and your spouse are both self-employed, so there's no work-provided health insurance to participate in? Well, when my husband Adam joined me in the entrepreneurial job space over 4 years ago, we joined Christian Healthcare Ministries instead of getting traditional health insurance. And it was the best decision for us, especially in these years of growing and raising a family while also running multiple businesses. CHM is a health cost-sharing ministry and is a faith-based alternative to health insurance. We did tons of research before choosing CHM, and if you know me and Adam, you know we are all about doing the math when making big or small financial decisions. And even though it's not insurance, CHM shares 100% of eligible medical bills, which is more than the typical 70 or 80% of medical bills paid for by insurance companies. All sharing is determined by the CHM guidelines, which you can check out before and after joining. And for the mamas and mamas to be listening, you truly cannot find a better healthcare option for maternity care. I had a vaginal delivery and a C-section and birth center care and hospital care between my 2 pregnancies and births, and it was all 100% shared for. And outside of birth, we've had our share of emergency room visits and procedures as a family, and those costs were all shared by members at Christian Healthcare Ministries, leaving us only paying our monthly contribution. CHM is less expensive month to month than insurance, and because there's no network, you can choose your care with whichever providers best fit your family. I seriously just cannot recommend Christian Healthcare Ministries enough. You've got to check them out. Go to elizabethmccravey.com/CHM for more information. Also putting that link in the show notes, elizabethmccravey.com/CHM. Now back to the episode. Yeah. And that's like, I mean, you said this so well, but like, we don't talk about this in our culture. Mm-hmm. And I've had that conversation with friends who don't have online businesses. Like, wait, like people are just talking about how much money they make. People are just showing screenshots of their bank account. Like, you don't, like, that's not a thing outside of this like super like niche kind of culture we've created online. I'm curious for you, like, so a lot of people are using those terms right now, right? Like you might say, like, gosh, I mean, I even was advising a friend the other day not to name her next product with the term 6-figure in it. I was like, don't do it. Like you can sell it another way without like putting that in there. But it's just so tempting for people to like, to show the stuff like that. You and I were talking before recording about the concept of like, I made this much this week. Here's a screenshot, or like, you know, the reels where it's like popping up of like all their Stripe and PayPal stuff. And when people like, cause my business does well and I do make like money online or whatever. So I can feel that temptation of like, well, if I show this, like, how can I like, what can that do? What should we do instead? How do we like just be like, no, we're not doing it. It's not the right way to market.
So there's one thing I want everyone to think about with this is if you really want to make an income claim, can you guarantee that 100% of your clients or even 90% will get it? You can't. So I think for us to be in integrity, we have to find the thing. What is the promise of the program or the coaching or the consulting we're doing? What is the thing that we can pretty much guarantee for the overwhelming majority of our clients? That's the thing that we should look for. And may we have to do more marketing? Yes. May we have to work harder to earn trust? Yes. But I'll tell you this, the market is shifting in a big way right now. I've been talking about this stuff like probably since 2017. And in the last 2 years, people are way more open to having this conversation. Before, people would be like, oh, Maggie, here she goes again. Now people are like, hey, can I talk to you about income claims? Because more and more people are rejecting it. And I think the thing you want to think about is at the end of the day, how do you want to run your business? And is this in line with your values? Is this for you something you consider ethical? And I'm not going to be the arbiter of what is or is not ethical, but in line with my values, income claim marketing is out of integrity because I cannot guarantee that result. But what I can do is be very clear about the experience and the results I can deliver. And I will say this, as the market becomes more savvy, when you say, be a 6-figure freelancer or whatever it is, you start to sound like everybody else. Like I open up my threads or my Instagram, it is drowning in that. You just sound, quite frankly, kind of lazy about your messaging. We need to do the work on the messaging. And I feel like from a marketing perspective across this industry, messaging has always been something that's skipped over to just cut right to the marketing. And the reality is for us to be able to articulate the value of what we're selling, we need to do more work on messaging and positioning. And that's not a sexy message. It doesn't make me popular, but it is the reality.
I mean, you're right that people are like having eyes open to it, over it. I mean, I've felt over it for a while, frankly, but yeah, it's good that people are waking up to it. And you were saying that you've been talking about this stuff for a really long time. I know online business had an extremely dramatic shift. I mean, I was there for it. I was at like a peak point in my business, even in 2020, 2021. And our world went through a crazy time, right? We have COVID, the Black Lives Matter movement. I mean, like so many things, like an election year, like so much crazy stuff happening. I feel like 2020 had so many people coming into online business. I think still to this date, that was the best year I've ever had in business. And also was the harsh year of my personal life. My dad passed away. Our house got robbed. Like, I mean, we had crazy, crazy stuff happening. But anyway, that was a time where I feel like a lot of cancel stuff happened in online business, of like people getting canceled, some people coming back from it, some people not. And a lot of like, we don't like these tactics anymore. Can you kind of talk about that, of like the shifts you've seen even prior to that and that year and since?
So I think what's interesting is that year was absolutely a turning point because we had a number of conditions. Number one, we had stimulus money. Like there was money flowing. And then we had people who were out of work, having to get creative about work. So a lot of them started moving into this. And then guess what? We were all trapped at home with our little tiny computers in our hands, logging far too much screen time. So we had this really big influx. And I will say 2020 was fascinating to watch because there was this influx of new people. So people who had been around for a while literally had some of their best years they've ever had. But they were also, for a lot of them, making some really wild promises. And a lot of the people that came in were not seasoned, or they're desperate, or they're looking for something to cling into in a really uncertain time. And then you bring in racial unrest, you bring in election, you bring in all these things. There is just so much going on. It was the perfect storm in a lot of ways. And I don't know that we will ever see that level of conditions. The other thing that happened that year is TikTok. Like people really started using TikTok. So we had these kind of overnight influencers / celebrity entrepreneur types hitting it big on TikTok. and all of a sudden, selling their templates and making, 6 figures a month. We saw some really wild things. But then what happened is we come back to reality. The shine starts to wear off. The economy starts behaving a certain way, and people start to realize like, oh, wait, that person totally took me for a ride. And that is really where I saw it. Like late 2020 and then into early 2021, I saw a lot of people all of a sudden going, wait a second, I've been scammed. And
I felt some of that.
Yeah. And more people are, I think that continues to build more momentum, because the reality of what we've been promised and actually what happens, they're just so disconnected. And it's like a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more people that speak up about it, the more people are willing to talk about their experiences, because we've destigmatized them. 2019, 2020, people were always telling me stories about their negative experiences, but it was always in quiet whispers. People would never acknowledge that because they were so ashamed. And I want to just say, for anybody who's felt like they were taken for a ride or scammed, or, they wasted money, there is no shame. These tactics work for a reason. The people executing them, whether they're doing it purposefully or not, are really good at their marketing tactics. And they are designed to shortcut your critical thinking and get you to a place where you make the buy and you will invest whatever amount of money is required to work with them.
Yeah. It does feel like when you're scammed, like you're the loser. And especially how, like we've said that, like we're investing our actual, like regular everyday money from your family, like into these various things. Yeah. And that's good to be reminded of, that like, it's not your fault when that sort of thing happens. One thing I wanted to ask you about as well, the whole concept, and this relates to the scamming, I think, but the crazy high price of like luxury coaching and luxury masterminds, there's just true insanity, guys. Like, and I feel like no one says it except for you. Like, you were someone who said this. I'm like, thank you for saying it. But like, where it's, I mean, as high as like, 80,000, I almost a few years ago truly considered joining a mastermind. So it's not even individualized coaching, it's a mastermind. And I want to say it was like $30,000 for the whole year, or maybe it wasn't even a whole year, but it was like $30,000. And that was if you paid in full. It was even more than that if you were to pay monthly for it. And ultimately, I decided, my husband and I were like, let's invest that in real estate instead. So I ultimately did not invest back in my business. We like literally were able to put that with a little more money and buy a house, y'all. Like, it's like, that's the like cost of these things. Why is this happening? What gives? Like, what do we kind of do about it, not fall victim to?
Okay, listen. When we're, and I say this with all seriousness, when we are talking about multiple 5 figures, we are talking, like, honestly, for me, anything over the $10,000 mark, I got questions. So when we are now getting into, I could buy a car, I could put a down payment on a house money in, maybe not where I live, but in certain parts of the North America. Like, when we were getting into that kind of money, hell no. I'm just saying hell no. Yeah. And what you got to think about, and I want to talk about how we got there in a second, but what you need to think about is, how can I possibly get the ROI on this? And in your case, taking $30,000 and investing it, you're going to get way more ROI in the long run than you ever would with this idea of, I'm paying money to be in proximity. And that is so much of what this is. It's one part delusion. Like, seriously, nobody to me is worth that kind of money. And it used to be, I used to always joke about the $25,000 mastermind. Now it's the $50,000 mastermind or $100,000 mastermind. Like, are you for real? Like, this is not play money. This is money I could put in an investment and earn way more money back on. So no, just no from me. Absolutely do not recommend. And you know what? Sometimes, sure, people have great results from these, but the whole idea, especially with the masterminds, and full disclosure, I run masterminds. They do not cost $10,000, because I was so fed up with this entire thing around it. Then in 2016, I lost my mind. I was like, I'm running masterminds from now on. So it's all predicated on I'm going to curate the most perfect group of people, and you are going to pay to be in the room, to be in their energy, and for me to grace you with my presence and give you one gem. And please note, the majority of these do not include travel costs, and you're always traveling places. They do not include one-on-one. It is literally like a group call in person or a group call once a month. Like I saw one not that long ago. I think it was $30,000. 2 retreats a year and 1 call a month. What are we even doing here? Like this for me is absolutely atrocious. I cannot. It makes me so hostile.
Yeah. I mean, the question of like, how do I get an ROI on this is like a real thing there. And I think so often in online business, we're taught reinvest in your business, reinvest in your business. You know, people selling those types of real luxury experiences, whether it's mastermind or something else, are often also marketing that like, I've invested over $500,000 in myself, in my growth, which is a lot of the self-help stuff as well. Like I'm someone who I actually don't invest a lot of money back into my business. And like I invest in real estate and other things. It's like, that's okay. You can actually like the ROI doesn't always have to be on like buying more Facebook ads, buying more courses, or buying more touching shoulders with other people like you, which is like what a lot of the masterminds are. I love that you run masterminds, like you're saying, and are like priced well with it and all of that. And that's something I've talked about before in this podcast, and I've gotten flack for it a few times in terms of particularly talking to service business owners and even with courses and things. But like, I believe that things should only cost so much sometimes. Same. And yet there is a thing of like, you know, people talking to, because I do education for designers, like talking to designers like, hey, you can book $100,000 clients in your design business. I'm like, no, like don't, like why, how, why? I'm confused. You know, these super, super giant projects. And maybe if you're working for like some huge corporation doing something, maybe, but I think that kind of messaging really confuses people, makes people feel like they're constantly undercharging when maybe they actually aren't. What are your thoughts on all that?
It is unadulterated BS. Like I'll give you an example. I see these ones for designers all the time, and I work with a number of designers, and it is so out of hand. And literally things like you can run $25,000 VIP weeks. Okay. Like let's break that one down real quick. Number one, you better have a really high caliber of client. 2, do you know how much marketing you're going to have to do? You might end up having one every other month, maybe for a year. And so we have to be careful of what we're trading in for these things. And that's the part of the story they never tell. Great example, the $100,000 client. You can book a $100,000 client, but it's going to be a retainer, and you're going to work for them pretty much full time for the full year. That's what people like. They're just setting these unrealistic expectations. And what really gets me when it comes to service business owners, and I'm sure you've seen this, is they feel like a loser because they're not booking $100,000 clients or $25,000 VIP gigs. Friends, this is not reality. I work with tech companies, and we're talking companies like making $100 million a year, you know, like big numbers. They aren't paying that for resources because guess what? It's too expensive. This market has created an entire bubble around pricing that is like literally, and I said this not that long ago, like people want to charge $5,000 for 45 minutes of coaching. I really believe in my heart of hearts, it's going to be exceptionally difficult to get that ROI. And guess what? Like people at big 4 consulting firms, the highest people, like people who are researchers and experts on these things, they're not charging that. So like, what are we playing at here? It is straight up delusional. Like I cannot.
Yeah. I'm with you. And I love how, you know, you mentioned at this very beginning, even the concept of staying solo.
Yeah.
And there is, and it breaks my heart in so many ways, but there's such a stigma against service business owners. And I actually I don't know if you know this about my story, I know listeners do, but like I started out as service business. I did not I still do some services, have some clients to still work with, but generally I have not stayed solo, but I still do teach designers in my course Book.Designer, and also teach people who are doing all kinds of different types of businesses. But anyway, but I get frustrated when it is like the only way to make money is if you decide to sell courses, or in the design world, if you want to sell website templates, and that's the only way to be successful. If you're staying stuck, your mindset's broke on, whatever, clients suck, all those kinds of things. How do we not buy into that like trap and mindset around service business?
And, this really dovetails nicely with the previous question. So one of the reasons we get so sucked in is because we get indoctrinated with this idea that we have to constantly grow. We constantly need to make more money. We constantly need to add our team. And like, what if we just like remembered why we started our businesses and what we wanted to do? So in the case of service business owners, I think it's really interesting because I have a lot of conversations where people are like, but I should launch a course. I need to diversify my income. And I'm like, hold up. Do you even really want to do those things? And the reality is, no, they don't want to do those things, but they think they should. And here's what I see in this market is there's a million templates, courses, whatever. And I'm not saying there's not room for those things, but as the more time that goes by, the harder it gets for people to be successful with those things because the market is more and more saturated. And what is always missing from this story of courses or templates or whatever is how much marketing you will have to do to be successful with that. What people don't understand is you're now trading your client work for marketing work. So if you don't like marketing, please don't do that. And I have to do a lot of marketing. I'm sure you do too, Elizabeth. But you're like, the more hands off your offers are, the more marketing you are going to have to do, the more of an audience build you're going to have to do. And not everyone wants to do that. People will always hire people to do the thing. The done for you service model is a proven model. It's not going anywhere. The only reason people crap on service businesses is to try to sell you the course about courses or the masterminds about masterminds or whatever it's going to be. Yeah. Then on the flip side, the solo business owners, again, people are made to feel like they are playing small. And the reality is I think it's like 80% of businesses in the US are one-person entities. The majority of businesses are solo businesses. And that's not to say you can't have an accountant or like a VA you work with occasionally, but not every service business owner wants to run an agency. Not everyone wants to have a team. A lot of us started businesses so we would not have to do things in this traditional way. So constantly pushing people to have a team or to have passive products or memberships or courses or whatever, that's not serving them. So if you're a service business owner that wants to stay solo, focus on getting good at what you do. Focus in on what you need to run your business. Going back to the conversation about making sure that you're not over-investing, have a budget. Yes, invest in education, but also make sure you're paying yourself really well. Because one of the things I see is people get really burnt out or they want to burn down their business because it's not meeting their financial needs. When the reality is they are spending so much extra money on all this stuff they don't need. Yes, you need to invest into some things, but maybe not the things you think, and definitely not a $25,000 mastermind.
Yeah, the burnout, the overinvesting, not paying. Yeah, it's shocking too when you see sometimes how many people are not paying themselves maybe what you would think. And that's something too that we should remember with the person making $1 gazillion a year. A lot of that they are not actually making. Like you could actually make the 7-figure business owner, like no jokes, you could make as much as them as a person without having that much top line revenue because they have huge teams, all the Facebook ad cost, all the contractors and the tech and all the things really adds up. And that's something you don't see when you're like glamorizing those big numbers.
Yeah. And I mean, I've worked behind the scenes in some of those businesses and I was making more than the person with a like $2 million business because they were so overextended, chasing. And I feel like this is where, as business owners, we need to figure out what's enough for us because chasing, as you are adding a team, as you are adding tools, as you're adding more expenses, you're also adding incremental risk to the business.
Yeah.
So you need to decide if you have an appetite for that or not. And a lot of people don't. And that's okay.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And that, like, okay, so with that, I'm sure you've noticed it, I have as well, but like a lot of business of all sizes, especially a lot of like more celebrity entrepreneurs preaching now, I built my business, not taking care of my health, not caring for my family, working 1 gazillion hours a week, laptop next to my bedside table. But now I don't do that and you shouldn't either. But even though that's how they got to their $1 gazillion a year business, how do we find, and this is something I've been exploring, the enoughness thing is so huge. And for me, it's like, I've realized a long time ago, I do not want as an 8-figure business a year ever. That sounds horrible. That sounds very stressful. That's not the lifestyle I'm trying to build. I'm trying to be a mom, trying to work from home, trying to like do other things. But how do we like reckon with those like extremes of like seeing people who built their business hustling so hard, saying like, don't do that, do what I'm doing now after I built the thing?
They are so disingenuous. It has honestly been really interesting to watch, but I'm sure you're with me, extraordinarily frustrating. Because so many of these people, we've seen a couple things. Number one, they're on their health journey and it's all about rest and everything else. Meanwhile, we've been watching them hustle their faces off forever. And like, you didn't get to your $10 million a year business by like not hustling. So please stop telling me I can do it like you did. At the end of the day, we all have to figure out for us what is important to us? What do we value? For me, I want to be able to go to the gym in the morning. I want to be able to make jam at 4:00 if I want. I mean, I just got a new plant stand. I'll probably build that at lunch today. Like, I want to have, that's way more important to me than the money. Once my financial needs are met and like that, like making more and more money doesn't enhance the quality of my life. And I mean, I don't have a particularly luxurious life, but I'm very comfortable. So I have kind of reached a place where I know what those numbers are. And as long as I'm meeting them, I'm good. Now, if you're not there already, you're probably like, oh, that's frustrating. Please don't buy into this. There is going to be hard work involved, but you don't necessarily have to hustle like they did. And this whole like soft life thing they're doing, as much as I'm all for it, like go read your book and garden or whatever it is you want to do, it doesn't work that way. There's got to be a happy medium of like having a joyful, fulfilled life and building your business over time, because building your business takes a lot of time and energy, and it takes much longer than anyone realizes. The other thing these people have done, I don't know if you've clocked this one yet, is there was a lot of them that built teams really big 2019, 2020, and now they descaled, and now they're preaching the value of the solo business. And I'm like, okay, listen, stop it. Because you built your list, you built your reputation, you built your marketing network, all based on that. So please knock it off. And one of the things, if you're like, how do I avoid these people? Before you give someone a lot of time, attention, money, especially money, slow down and watch them for a long time, because these people are, a lot of these celebrity entrepreneurs, if not all of them, they're shapeshifters. They will move with the message. Like now that rest and soft life is more, more in the kind of mainstream, they shift with the trends. They're very, very clever. So we have to be much more astute and discerning about how they might be doing this. And if you watch them over time, you start to really see the pattern. You go, oh, that's interesting. They're just saying what we want to hear in this moment.
Yeah. Yeah. We often are blinded by a large social following, by the screenshots of how much money someone's making, by the really cool photos, brand photos. Like that's such a huge thing. I mean, it's tough. And I'm curious, do you know where the like soft CEO stuff started? Is that like a TikTok thing? Like I actually feel like I'm less in, I feel like I don't use TikTok, but I feel like I'm like less in tuned with like where all that came from, but I see it too. I feel like I've always been trying to do that more.
I feel like maybe not soft CEO came from like soft girl life on TikTok.
Okay.
And I think just a collective, like if you look at everything that has gone on since 2020, people like there is a level of existential dread. There is a level of burnout on a like societal level that we have never seen before. Like everyone just kind of wants to get back to simpler times, to precedented times, if you will. So I think it's a very natural societal reaction. And then that impacts how things show up in online business. Plus, we've had a lot of very vocal Black women in the last few years talking about rest. And of course, people are always going to come in and co-opt those messages as well.
Yeah. Okay. How do we make sure we're not marketing in a way that's icky?
So number one thing is gut check. And if your gut's not working quite right, please detox yourself from and not a gut detox. I mean, like a social media email thing. Like if anyone's kind of giving you that, not sure. If you're not sure, just disengage with that, because the longer you consume a steady diet of this crap, the more it gets into your brain, it gets in your head. It makes you think all these things like, oh, they might have the solution. Oh, I'm missing something. Oh, I have a mindset issue. When really you have to remember they're manufacturing problems for you. So when you look at your own marketing, gut check that tactic. Does this align with my values? How do I want my person on the receiving end to feel? I want them to feel excited to work with me, not scared. Like we see a lot of conversations about like, if this triggers you, I don't want to work with someone who feels triggered by me. That's a terrible place to start a relationship. Are you kidding me? So really checking your marketing tactics against like, how do I want people to feel? Is this feeling balanced? One of the things we see a lot in the way the marketing is the celebrity entrepreneurs, they know they have more power and they use that and they wield that in a way that makes people feel terrible about themselves. So they buy. So, you can pick apart each individual tactic and also question where the tactic came from. Like if your coach is saying, hey, you need to do XYZ, be like, well, why do I need to do XYZ? And what you'll start to see is that some of these tactics are actually not actual tactics. They're just kind of scammy things they made up. And then other things you'll see is like, would a normal consumer brand do this? No. And that's always my test. Like, would I tell my corporate client to do this? No, I'm not going to do it in my own business.
Yeah.
The other thing is, if you feel at all embarrassed about it, question that. Get on a line of inquiry, because sometimes you're going to be embarrassed because you don't want to show up, but sometimes you're going to be embarrassed because it's icky.
Yeah. The consumer brand question's good because, and I've heard you say this, that the term online business often, if we really look at it, it's like it's referring to a lot of these scammy tactics. Because most businesses exist on the internet now. A lot of Amazon, that's an online business, right? Yeah. But yet they're not. That's like a different industry than what we're talking about with our little world here. Yeah. Can you talk more about that actually? The kind of difference there?
Yeah, for me, when like online business is kind of a made up category. I don't really believe it exists. It's like it made sense when people were, not doing a lot of internet marketing with things, but it's like the majority of businesses are doing things. And I think I want to make the distinction is I feel like at its heart, like online business is about, I can work with whoever, right? But it's come to mean a lot of different things. So if you're like, yeah, I have an online business because I have clients all over the place and I use it primarily on my marketing, no beef. But online business, really has just become this collection of really dodgy, sketchy tactics and strategies that have become very normal that I would never, ever see in my corporate marketing career. I observe these things and I think if I got on a call in 10 minutes and told the CEO of XYZ company this, I would be fired. Like, these things are so deeply out of integrity. And if we're always questioning like, well, how can I get around the rule about spam or FTC and income claims guidelines? Like there's been responses to a lot of the scammy things. And now people are trying to skirt them. If there's a rule like that, there's a reason. So we need to be looking at that from a place of like, hey, you know what? How would they do this in normal business world?
Yeah. It does feel like a wild, wild west of like, which is where there's not a lot of regulations, which is where like when you do feel like you got scammed in some kind of group program, it's like, what do you do? I'm curious. I kind of just like a final question for you. How can we change the industry, our online business industry on an individual level? And like, do you think spreading awareness is, you do such a great job with that while not being like tacky and like calling just like gossiping about people, which I really appreciate.
Thank you.
But what do you think we need to do basically?
So there's a couple ways we can approach this. Number one is we can't influence necessarily everybody, but who can we influence? You can influence your business friends. You can influence your clients, especially if you're a done-for-you service provider. Like if you're a client, I'll say a designer, and they're like, hey, I want to do this dark pattern. You can educate your client on why that's a terrible idea and you don't recommend it. We have a lot of influence over our clients. So being vocal and being willing to stick your neck out just a little bit to start, and then, you'll build that muscle over time. The other thing is, as a consumer, we have the ability to choose to not do business with these people. So I have a list of things that if I see someone doing them, I will never, ever work with them. So if I see someone using an income claim, they're immediately on my absolutely will never work with you list. And each of us needs to have a list of things that's like, these are the business practices. They're unacceptable to me. They're out of alignment with my values. I don't feel like they're ethical. I don't want any part of them. And part of that is committing to slowing down and recognizing a lot of these tactics are designed to speed up the sales process and get us in there before we can even stop and think. So if you're in a situation where you're like, your two friends have bought this course and it's closing in 3 minutes at midnight, and you're trying to decide, back away from the computer, put the credit card away, because that is a tactic designed to make you, use scarcity and to rush you through that process. So really committing to being curious about what's happening, not spending the money, and being really particular about who you give your time, attention, and most of all, your money. That is probably the most powerful thing we have, because it is really hard to run a business when you have less and less customers. So if we each collectively decide like, hey, that person who says 8-figure businesses are totally normal, we just cut them off at the knees. That's how change is starting to happen. Very slowly, and just know that this stuff has been going on for a long time and it's not going to just go away overnight.
Yeah. And that is like so empowering too, because it does often feel like when we're being marketed these things, you do feel powerless of like, I need this thing, but the doors are closing, et cetera, which that's just something I didn't get to ask you about that we could have talked about, but like false scarcity is such a huge thing of like, there's literally false scarcity where it's a fake countdown timer that's unique to your link. Okay, guys, it's a real thing. Okay. Like I've designed websites that like people have had that on there, and I feel like that's hopefully becoming less common, but then there's also the false scarcity of or the manufactured scarcity is the correct term, I guess, but where it's like the thing's closing and it does freak you out and you can feel really powerless in that. So what you just said can really give you back that power as the customer and the ultimate decider and leader of your business.
And one thing I always recommend to people is to stop ourselves from making those kind of impulse or emotionally driven purchases. Sit down at the start of the year, map out what you need. So if you're like, hey, I want to start doing Pinterest, I need a course on Pinterest, or I need a Pinterest manager, map that out for the year. The same way you would have in corporate, like a learning and development plan, have a plan for those investments in your business. Set a budget to it. And that just removes I always I'm like, oh, that'd be interesting. And then I'm like, no, it's not in the plan. It's not in the budget, because if you're sticking to the budget, guess what? You're going to have more money to pay yourself. You're probably going to have more profit in the business. You're going to be able to protect your interests, because at the end of the day, I've said that at the end of the day, 17 times in this interview, but at the end of the day, you are the only person that's going to look out for you. And I feel like that's really hard, because these celebrity entrepreneurs, they act like they're your best friend, but they're not. The only person they're looking out for is themselves and their bank accounts. They will gladly take your money, so you need to protect yourself.
Super helpful. Maggie, this interview's been amazing. I feel like I think everyone's heads are just like on everything you said. Seriously, I mean, I could talk to you all day about this. I wish we had
I can talk about it all day for sure.
I know. I wish we could schedule even more time, but tell everyone where they can, I mean, you have so much content out there around the same stuff we just talked about. Tell everyone how you can find your podcast, your multiple podcasts, and then your website, your social media, all that stuff.
So my number one place you can find me is bsfreebusiness.com. I have 2 podcasts. One is called Duped, the Dark Sides of Online Business, where we delve into why does income claim marketing work? why did I get scammed? Like, we look at all of that.
Such a great,
And
so
then
great.
I also host the podcast, the BS Free Service Business Show, but depending on when this airs, it will be called the Staying Solo Podcast very soon. So, if you didn't find the BS Free Service Business, go find Staying Solo. And I hang out on Instagram and Threads at BS Free Business.
Yeah, I love that name change for your podcast. That's cool.
Me too. I'm really excited.
Staying Solo is that's really like a really strong title. Awesome. Well, yes. Well, I'll link all that in the show notes and share it all. Thank you, Maggie, so much for sharing all your thoughts and all your expertise with us.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, thank you for listening to the podcast, friend. I so appreciate you being here. That just flew by, didn't it? If you want more Breakthrough Brand, then you have to join my free Facebook community for podcast listeners, where you can connect with like-minded business owners and go deeper on what you learn on this podcast. Go to elizabethmccravy.com/Facebook to request to join the free group. I cannot wait to connect with you there. Again, that's elizabethmccravy.com/Facebook to access the group. Also, if you love this episode, leaving a rating and review for the show wherever you're listening, or sharing this episode with a friend is a great way to support this podcast. I appreciate it so much. Again, thank you for listening, and I'll be back next week with another episode.